Hello, everybody. Good day, good afternoon, good evening, particular time zone. My name is Gareth Dyke. Welcome back for another in our series of Bentham Science Diffusion Editing free online webinar training events. Today, we're going to be talking about the structure of an academic article. Now, I hope sound check. Let's get going by checking that you can all hear me and that everything is working okay. So that you can hear me. If you would like to respond to me, put some information into the chat box, get in touch with us, get in touch with our team. That would be great. As we move through this webinar today, we will also be encouraging you to interact with us, ask us any questions that you have, and there will be time at the end of this presentation for questions. So please don't be shy. Please, if you have questions, if you have comments, put them into the chat box. Put them into the chat box down there on the right-hand side of the Webinar Jam screen. I hope you can all hear me and that the audio is working well. So, good news. Wonderful. I see that we have a great many people joining us today from all over the world. So, fantastic chance for us to discuss with you today the structure of academic article writing. Wonderful. My name is Gareth Dyke. We're just going to give it like a moment or two longer as more and more people join us for this webinar today. So don't worry, we'll get started with the content in just a moment. Gareth Dyke is my name. This is the second in a series of webinar training events that we have planned, Bentham Science working together with Diffusion Editing. So if you have any questions as we move through the webinar today, please type them into the chat box. At the end of our presentation today, there will be some time in order for us to answer any questions that you may have about the content, the structure of an academic paper. This is my background as a researcher. As an academic, I worked many years in Ireland, and now as a researcher, having published myself more than 280 academic articles, I'm also working as an editor, training in writing, in English language communication, and working for journals, working for a number of different journals. So I certainly hope that in this presentation, insights, tricks, and tips about the structure of academic papers will help you to be more effective in your writing and publishing in the future. And don't worry, some of the slides that you'll see today have quite a lot of text on them. We will provide everybody that registered for this event with a link to a replay video, so you can watch this back whenever it's convenient for you. You can have a look at the information and the content in this presentation, because we certainly hope that it will help you. It will be of use to you as you write and publish your own academic work. So you're probably asking, what are we going to talk about in this presentation today? What's the point of listening to this presentation? We are going to talk about two key things: the basic structure of academic research articles, and then we're going to dive into the different sections. And I'm going to give you, I hope, some insights and some ideas that you can use in your own academic writing in the future to be more effective putting together your own articles, writing your own research papers. Everybody's working at home at the moment. Indeed, our first webinar in this month-by-month series dealt with the issue of working effectively from home. All of this training that we provide, Bentham Science and Diffusion Editing, is in order to help you be more effective, publishing your work more easily, more effectively, getting your work published in leading international journals, such as those, of course, that are published by our colleagues at Bentham Science. So let's get started. Let's dive in. Let's start talking about the structure of academic article writing. Now, this is the most important slide that I will show you in this presentation today. Why is it so important? People always ask me. Well, this slide shows you the structure of an academic article, and it shows you that there are two sections to academic article structure, to academic article writing. There's the title and the abstract. That's one section. And then there's the rest of the article, the so-called main text, the IMRAD academic article structure that you've probably heard of before. Maybe you've attended some training in the past. Two sections to academic articles, the title and the abstract, and the rest of the paper. Why is it so important to think about academic papers in two sections? People always ask this question. It's important because most people don't read all of academic articles. Ask yourself the question, when was the last time you read the whole of an academic paper? Almost never. Most people, including reviewers and editors, focus their attention, at least initially, on the title and on the abstract. Of course, it's important to understand the rest of academic article structure as well, but I encourage you to put time and energy into the title and into the abstract, because this is what will affect your chances initially of getting your papers taken seriously by editors and by peer reviewers. The title and the abstract are so important to get your message across in terms of article structure. We're going to talk now about titles and abstracts, and then we're going to jump in to the IMRAD structure in the second section of this webinar, providing you once again with some insights. We've edited hundreds of thousands of academic articles. Bentham, our partners, have published hundreds of thousands of academic articles. We know what makes an effective, well-structured academic paper, and I'm going to share some of that information with you in this webinar today. Think about the title of your next academic paper. What makes a good and effective article title? Well, actually, quantitative research has been done on the length of academic article titles versus their citation rates. We know that shorter titles tend to get more citations. A good title for your next paper should contain the fewest possible words that adequately describe the contents. Keep it short, effective English, short, clear, easy to understand phrases. You should identify the main issue of the paper, talk about the subject in the title, be accurate, unambiguous, specific, and complete, and attract people's attention. Get them interested, get them allured, get them enticed, get them thinking, I would like to read this academic paper. Lots of authors do this in English by posing a question with the title. Your next article may very well be about answering a question. Most academic papers are about hypotheses, questions. Why not ask the question in the title of your paper? Then readers will think, this is an interesting question. I'm going to want to read more. Make your title compelling, concise, and informative. The most important words in there related to the topic. Entice the reader, get them interested in wanting to read more, okay? But at the same time, not over sensational. We get lots and lots of papers for editing by non-native English speakers who tend to use superlative words, hyperbolic words, words that sound informal as adjectives to us in English. Magnificent, marvelous, fantastic, words like that. So be careful with your word choice as well when you put together your titles of your articles. Keep it short and simple. The main issue, the subject, accurate, unambiguous, and complete. Get people interested and use different words in the title that you would then use in your keywords. Very important point. You have the chance with your keywords to get different words into search engines for people to find your articles than are already used in the title. If you use the same words from the title in your keywords, you are missing out on making your work more search engine optimizable. Use different words in the keywords than you use in the title to attract people, to make sure that people can find your work. If they find it, they're going to cite it, they're going to read it. And that's what we want as academics. People read our work, people cite our work, our H-index goes up, the journal impact factor goes up, everybody is happy. Here's some examples in 2019. I know they're not that short, so they're kind of breaking my initial rule for short article titles, but they nevertheless use another punctuation trick that you can also have a go at using in your own writing, and that's the use of a colon in the title. Check this out. Something general, colon, something specific. Something specific, colon, something general. This is another way to include more information in the structure of your academic article title, get more information in there, while at the same time keeping your readers interested. These, I think you'll agree, are interesting studies. I am not a medical researcher, but I look at these and I think these are interesting. I'm going to be interested in reading more. And that's what you want. That's what you have to do with. Look at the contents of the paper based on the title and based on the abstract. So I pulled out a few examples from recently published, highly cited, or we hope highly cited, articles published by Bentham from these two leading journals that Bentham Science currently publishes. Short titles, interesting for people in this particular subject area. Less than 7 words in the title of an article has been shown to actually increase your chances of getting your work highly cited. Less than 7 words is what you're aiming for if you don't punctuate that title. Here's an example from my own work, and I show you this in order to illustrate the fact that you should argue, discuss, work together with your co-authors to decide on what an effective title for your next paper is going to be. We don't do this in a rush. We do this by arguing, by discussing, by editing the article title, targeting 2 particular journals. And something that we're going to talk about in later journal, how to pick a journal and then write your article with that be different in a subject area specific journal than it would be if you were sending your work to an international high impact factor multidisciplinary journal, for example. That's the title, and it's so important to think about what the words will be, how you will sell your work to editors with the title of your next academic paper. Let's talk now then about abstracts, the second part of that first section of academic articles structure. To your success as an author. Always imagine that you're writing the abstract for a conference, or always think no one's going to read anything else of my article than the abstract. This is a very good technique, a very good mindset to get into as a writer, because your abstract has to stand alone. It's got to be honest and precise, with no jargon, no technical words that nobody outside of your own research group is going to know about. Short and specific and citing no references. And be aware, of course, that the quality of your abstract is going to inform your editor's decision. They will make decisions often about whether to send your paper out for peer review or not, based on the quality of the abstract. 9 out of 10 papers that get submitted to Nature, that get submitted to Science, for example, get rejected by editors before they get sent for peer review. We used to have parties in our research group when we get an email back from Nature saying, we've sent your paper out for review, because it's a huge step. It's a big deal for authors to just get their articles out for review. So put the time into this, put the effort into this. Many journals base their decisions on the abstract alone. And of course, sadly, many authors, maybe you've done this, I know I've done this, they write the abstract in a huge rush, almost as an afterthought. This has to be a standalone piece of writing with a very clear message, accurately reflecting the full text of the paper. Now, I know it's difficult, especially if English is not your first language. Maybe it's difficult even if English is your first language. You can write an effective, informative, accurate, structurally correct abstract for your next academic paper by following what we call the 4-question technique. Write down these 4 questions at the bottom of this slide, write them down, and then answer them based on your own scientific academic work. Why did you do the study? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? Those 4 questions, then answer them with 1 or 2 sentences from your own work, and then delete the questions. And you end up with the basic structure of a well-written abstract. Why did you do the study? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? Delete the questions. You will have about 100 or so words, I guarantee you, that you can then edit into the structure of a well-written abstract. Why has it got that structure? It's got that structure because that's what makes it easier for readers to follow. Abstracts need basic structure. Actually ask authors for structured abstracts. Here's an example from the biological sciences. Many journals ask for this, a structured abstract, background, methodology, conclusions, and significance. You can do this anyway. Give your abstracts structure, write them as structured abstracts, even if your journal doesn't want you to. You can then make sure that you have the chance to get your work into those leading journals. The structure is hugely important. Background, methodology, conclusions, and significance. This is how you put your articles together, with structure to give you that step forward to make things easier for you to write the paper, but also it's easier for readers and people following your work to be able to engage with you. So you can go to an abstract. You can go to an abstract that you've read recently, you know, from one of the journals that you read all the time, one of the high-profile international journals that we all read all the time, and with a colored marker, with a colored pen, you can mark off the different sections of the abstract using the 4-question technique that I've just shown you. You can go in, you can mark the answers to the different questions. I guarantee you that you will be able to. The editors will have they will told the authors to put this information into the paper in that particular sequence. That's the basic structure of a well-written abstract. And here's that example from my own work that we talked about a little bit ago. I showed you the title. You can have a look at these examples. We can send you many more examples from our own editing work, from Bentham Science journals that you can have a look at in your own subject area to see what a well-written, well-structured abstract is going to look like. Copying the style of other authors who are successful in your field is the best way to learn about academic article writing and academic article structure. I guarantee you this is another good insight. Of course, structure, the topic of our webinar today, is the most crucial element of article writing. It's like watching a movie or reading a book or reading a detective story or a novel. You've got to know where you've come from, where you are now, and where you're going. A plot is needed. A paper, an academic article, is like a story. It's no different to any other kind of creative writing. So I've given you some insights into academic article overall structure, the 2 sections. I've talked about the title. I've talked about the abstract. We're now going to jump in and make our way through the rest of the IMRAD academic paper article structure, starting with the introduction. Now, we've all written these pieces of academic papers. What does the introduction do? Bear in mind, keep in mind that the average length of an academic article is about 6,000 words. 5,000 or 6,000 words is likely to be the length of your next academic paper. So balance the structure of the writing. You're going to have about 1,500 words to write an effective introduction. What are you going to do? You're going to grab the reader, get them immediately interested in the crucial issue that your paper addresses. Keep it short. 2 or 3 paragraphs is sufficient for an effective article introduction. And do not give the reader a literature review. Many students, especially PhD students, they've done a literature review anyway as part of their PhD, let's say. They think, I'm going to use that in all my academic papers. Nobody wants to read hundreds and hundreds of references. You need a few key state-of-the-art references that tell the reader why your question is interesting, that place your question, the question that your article addresses, in a wider context. Get people interested in the article. Straight to the issue. What's the question that your paper is addressing? Remember, we talked about question setting in the context of the title of our article. Maybe now you're going to repeat the title. You're going to tell the reader again, what's the question? What's the issue that the article addresses? Get the most important details in there, and you need a summary of the controversies and best evidence. And you should end your abstract, your introduction, excuse me, with a crisp and clear research question and tell the reader how you set out to answer it. We recommend that you use active voice in your writing rather than passive voice in your writing. We'll talk about this, I'm sure, in the question session at the end. Writing is a much more effective way of getting your message across than the passive voice. We'll talk about this at the end. But if you look in high-profile international journals, journals like Nature, journals like Science, they are using the active voice for communication. Most people who teach English communication skills will tell you that writing, we did this, I did this, our team did this, is more effective than something was done or a beaker was collected. Okay, but we'll come back to that. We'll talk about that later in this session, in the question session at the end. So here's a template for writing a successful academic introduction. 3 paragraphs. Tell the reader what the question is, then give the reader the state of the art that show the reader that this particular issue is important, that this is pertinent, that this is something that they should care about. And then finish your introduction by saying, here we show, this study shows. Set up the question, tell the reader the state of the art, and then finish with a question such as, this study shows. This study shows. Here we have the study shows, and then you can put that into the sections. You can tell people what they need to know in the introduction. Let me recap. 3 sections in the introduction. State the question, tell the reader the state of the art, and then finally finish by saying this study shows. 3 paragraphs in your introduction, as a structure is sufficient. Now we move on to the methods section. And most people say that the methods section is the boring bit. This is the boring bit, they say. And I disagree with that. Actually, your methods section is the best part of academic writing. This is your chance as a writer to take your readers on a journey through your study in terms of the structure. What did you do first? What did you do second? What did you do third? What did you do fourth? And then last. The timeline of your experiment or of your study provides you with the structure for your methods section. So think about the timeline. What did you do in your work? That's the structure for the methods, a narrative of the steps that you took in your experiment or in your study. It's so important, the method section. It's the best bit of academic paper writing. This is also a key element of academic structure for you to get right as an author, because this is the reason that the area where often papers get rejected. The most common reason for article rejection in peer review is because editors or peer reviewers feel that authors have used the wrong method to answer their question. So you must give enough information in the methods to enable a qualified reader to repeat the study. So show your work to other people, show it to us if you like, talk to colleagues. Is there enough information here for you to understand what I did? If your method section is thin on details, editors worry that you're hiding something. So a timeline for the structure and enough information for somebody else to be able to repeat the study. By the way, this timeline structure for method section writing is followed in many papers. So this is why data collection is talked about before data analysis, of course. Most method sections, at least in the empirical quantitative sciences, they finish with statistical analysis because, of course, you've got to collect your data before you analyze your data. It's a timeline sequence. So when you sit down to write your next article, your next method section, structure the methods around the timeline, the sequence of events that you used in your study. This structure you can see here in an example from one of my own papers. Data collection is followed at the end of the method section by data analysis. This means once you have your method section structure organized, you're actually done with the structure of academic paper writing. Good news. The reason I say that is because you should use the same sequence of events, introduce information in the same order as you did discussion. That's how you keep your reader interested. That's how you keep people knowing where they are in the study. In your results then, by the way, here you present your outcomes, you present your data, you present your results. And this is actually the section of academic paper writing that most people do first. They perform an experiment, they collect data, and then they make figures, they make tables, they do the analysis. You create information that goes into your results section first, your figures and your tables. So this bit, this that comes in a little bit later in the discussion. So follow the structure of the method section. Keep the information coming for the reader in the same sequence as it was introduced in the method section, ordering around primary and secondary outcomes in the same sequence as in the method section. And we have a saying in English, don't we, that a picture is worth 1,000 words. If you can give your readers information about your results using a picture rather than lots of text, then that's much better. That's a more effective way to get your message across. You'll make these figures first anyway, probably, but please try to use images because that's just much more effective as a tool to get your message across. And you don't need to duplicate information in the text and in the tables. These are standalone pieces of information within the article. A picture is worth 1,000 words, using the same sections in the method section, in the results section, excuse me, that you put together in the methods. Give the readers the information about your study in the same sequence that you presented it previously in the methods section. So finally, you'll be pleased to hear, we now move on into the discussion. Often journals ask for a single section called the results and discussion. Doesn't matter, do the same sequencing as I've been discussing in this presentation. Here at the end of the paper, you are finally going to explain to the reader what your results mean, why they differ from what other workers have found, and you're going to interpret. Discussion and interpretation are synonyms in English, aren't they? So you will relate your discussion back to the objectives and the questions that you raised in the introduction. Okay, so tell the reader again at the beginning of the discussion what the answer is to that question that your paper is addressing. Tell the reader at the beginning, here's the answer to the question. This is the reason that you've been reading my article. This is the reason that you're still here. Now I'm going to tell you the answer to the question. And don't forget to suggest future directions for research, new methods, any further explanations for deviations from recently published results in the discussion, because if you don't, the reviewers will. Or another author reading your paper will come up with an idea based on your work and then go off and do it without citing you. It's critically important to make sure people cite you. So if you have a new idea based on a study that you're currently writing up for publication, talk about it in your discussion so that then other people have to cite you. Don't give people the opportunity to use your work and come up with new ideas. Do not write an expansive essay found. Keep it simple. Keep it concise. Start the discussion with a single sentence that states your main findings, what's the main outcome of the study, and talk about your strengths as well as your weaknesses. Again, this is a great trick to make sure your paper has the maximum chance of getting through peer review. Peer reviewers will be looking for weaknesses in your study. If you talk about them in the discussion, you show that you're aware of the shortcomings of your work, and this means that other people can't point them out in review. You increase your chances of getting your paper successfully steered through the peer review process. So in the discussion, here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be relating our study to what has already been found, discussing what our study means, and talking about any of those unanswered questions. What did your research not address? What kinds of issues could your research not deal with? Relate, discuss, and pose those unanswered questions. And please, let me plead with you not to finish your academic articles with sentences like, more research will be needed if we're going to fully understand the answer to this question, or further research will be required if we're gonna. Now, so many authors finish their papers with phrases like that, and it's a weak way to finish your academic article. Finish strong like running in a race. You will have a number of conclusions from your study, right? You'll have a number of key outcomes from your research. Rank those outcomes in order of importance and build in the discussion or in the conclusion to the most important one. Put your most important, most significant conclusion at the end in the last sentence of your paper so that readers finish the article feeling positive. They finish feeling, I agree, great conclusion, strong finish. Don't be weak. Don't use this cliche, more research will be needed. Many authors do it, and it's obvious, isn't it? Like, of course, more research will be needed. Of course, that's the nature of research. Editors, you will find, actually often delete these kinds of phrases from the end of research papers. So finish with your most powerful, your most important, your most significant conclusion at the end. Let me remind you, if there's nothing that you remember from this presentation today, try to remember this one key insight. Academic article structure is divided into two sections. The title and the abstract, of course, that's one section. And then the rest of the paper, that's the second section. And please think about your titles and about your abstracts being effective when you put together these sections of academic writing, attracting people's attention to your work, getting editors and peer reviewers and readers interested and excited in your work. And I've given you some clear structural templates for the introduction, for the title, for the abstract, for the introduction, for the methods section, and for the results and for the discussion. Is absolutely critical. So many people, especially young, inexperienced researchers, they sit down at their computer, they start to write, hey, I'm writing an academic paper, and they just start to hammer out those words on the keyboard and start to put the article together. This is an inefficient way to write anything. You need a plan. You need to know before you start to write your message, your audience, and your structure. And structure is what we've talked about in this presentation today, but think about the message of your next academic paper. What is it that you would like people reading your work to take away from that experience? What's the key message of your academic paper? That's important to know before you start to write. Why? Because you're going to use that message in the writing, in the title, in the covering letter, in the discussion. What's the key message? Think about how you would explain your research to somebody who doesn't have a clue about what you're working on. I always think about my grandmother when I'm going through this exercise. In my head, how would I explain my most recent research study to my granny? You know, that's how, by the way, you can develop simple, easy to understand messages that help you to sell your work to leading journals. Okay, so things to do before you start to write. Choose your topic, identify your audience, identify your purpose, and gather supporting details. Your message, your audience, so which journal are you going to send your work to, and the structure. We will and talk in more detail about how you can effectively message your articles and how you can select target journals effectively. Today, we've talked about structure, preparation, things to think about before you even put pen to paper, the message, the audience, and the structure. How you can sell yourself to capture an editor's attention, which, by the way, is the secret to getting your work published in those top-tier leading international journals. Okay, so that's very important. Structure, a clear structure. You need that, otherwise you'll get lost, your editor will get lost, and we can help you. We're going to give you some more training in simple rules that can make a huge difference to your work. That's the topic that we're going to come back to and talk about in other webinar presentations in this series. Okay, so preparation, selling yourself, structure, and effective writing. So before we jump into the question session, and I can see that colleagues are already writing questions into the chat box. That's fantastic. Let's just recap what we've talked about today in this webinar. We've talked about the basic structure of academic papers, and I've given you a deeper dive into some of the aspects of the different parts of academic paper writing by giving you templates for the different sections. The title, less than 7 words, the technique, the introduction, do it in 3 sections, the methods section, think about the timeline of your work and develop subheadings, subsections based on the timeline of your work. Data collection before data analysis, results and discussion. Repeat the sequence of events that you introduced to the reader in the methods section. Thank you so much for listening. There's a discount code that you can enter into our Diffusion editing website if you would like to get a discount on any of our editing services as a result of listening to this webinar. Let me say again that this is a webinar in a series of webinars that we have put together with our colleagues, our friends and collaborators at Bentham Science. So I'd also encourage you to jump on over to their website, have a look at the other events in this series, and have a look at the great series of books, ebooks, and journals that Bentham Science are publishing. All of them, by the way, fully open access, which is, again, a topic that we'll come back to and talk about in our later presentations in this series. So now it's over to you. We have a good chunk of time remaining at the end of this presentation if anyone would like to ask a question. Okay, so I can see that a number of questions are coming in. Amir has asked, could you explain about the state of the art? Now, this is an expression that comes from grant writing, especially in the European Union. They love using words like this. And state of the art just refers to what is currently known on a particular topic. What is the current thinking about a particular topic? So you're writing a research paper, let's say it's on, I don't know, cancer of some kind, cancer of a particular organ system. You will need in your introduction to explain to the reader what's currently known on that particular topic. What's the state of the art? And you do this by providing a short number of key references, perhaps review papers, perhaps recent articles that deal with similar questions. Don't go overboard with the number of citations. Keep it simple, as we've talked about in this presentation. Dr. Sharma is asking, could you put some light on how to write a good by giving you the 4-question technique, which works really, really, really well for writing abstracts. The other thing I would say about writing abstracts is always remember, always think, always imagine that you're writing an abstract for a conference presentation, right? So always keep in mind that your readers may very well only read your abstract, which of course is the case at conferences. An abstract. So 200, 250 words. Have a go at using the 4-question technique that we've talked about in this webinar. Why did you do the study? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? The question sequence, just answer those 4 questions with the information from your own study and then delete the questions. And I guarantee you that you will end up with text that you can use for your next academic article. Dr. Sharma is asking specific questions. I would ask you, Dr. Sharma, to drop me an email or get in touch with our colleagues at Bentham Science after the webinar. We're certainly very happy to organize webinars for anybody, for your organization or any other organization in the future. But get in touch with us afterwards and we'll come back to you with information on that particular point. Our colleagues at Bentham Science will also reach out to you about that. Rashini, and excuse me if my pronunciation is not great. You know, I'm a simple English guy, so sometimes I pronounce people's names incorrectly. I would like to know how to identify your audience and how to approach them. Okay, so the best way to do this, the best way to identify your audience in academic writing is to look at other articles that other academics in your field, successful academics in your field, have recently published. So you would think, who are the leading academics in my particular research field internationally, you know, and go and look at their articles, go and look at how they sell their studies to big journals. You don't have to copy. I'm not saying you should copy their writing. No, that would be plagiarism, which is the subject of our next question in a minute. But you can certainly copy people's style, how they set up their articles, how they pose questions, how they structure their articles, even how people put together effective figures, how people put together effective tables. So I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, please send us another message into the chat. How plagiarism affects on review papers. Dr. Sadiq is asking this question. Well, this is a huge problem in academic writing in general, plagiarism. And it's particularly a problem for colleagues who live and work and write in English if it's their second language. People do it without thinking. They do it unintentionally. I do it myself all the time in my second language. You read something in your second language and you think, oh, that sounds great. That sounds really good. I'm going to use that. And you do. You use it inadvertently in your own writing in the future. So it's very important to cite everything, to look at your sources, to cite, and if in doubt, cite anyway, because you can always edit the paper down in the future. International journals will send articles through plagiarism checking software. And if your article gets flagged as being potentially plagiarized, like a percentage of more than 10% of the text can be tracked back with search engines to other articles, they will just reject your paper. So it's something that's very important to think about. And we can help. Like, we can certainly provide you with plagiarism checking, a plagiarism checking service for your articles, if that's of interest. Dr. Mukherjee is asking, Dear Gareth, can you tell what you think about putting references in the results section? How to select references in the results section? And generally, how many references should the results section have? Okay, so again, a general rule of thumb for citing references in academic writing is to, number one, be comprehensive. Right? You need to show the editor and the reviewers that you've taken a balanced view of all of the other work that's been going on in your field. So don't just cite your own work or, you know, your friend's work. Make a balance with your citations, references that both support and don't support your own view. Okay, and this is why review papers are so important in academic writing, because review papers provide us with an overview of a particular field. So rather than citing everything that's ever been written before on a particular subject, I can just cite review papers. There's no simple answer to how many references your different sections should have, because it depends on the field, it depends on the subject area, but try to keep it balanced and comprehensive while at the same time not citing huge numbers of articles. It's a difficult one, I know, but, you know, depending on your subject area, go and find, if you can, review papers in your particular area. Anila is asking, academically, we need to write review articles, but how to select a topic for writing a review article? This is a very good question. People ask this question a lot. You will know, Anila, you will know in your particular subject area, where are the important questions? Where are the unanswered questions? Where are the areas of controversy, the areas of debate? You know, so the first step to doing a review article is to sit down with a piece of paper and think, what would I like to know the answer to? Which areas within my own subject area are in debate, are controversial, are things that other colleagues would like to know about? So that's how you pick a question. That's how you pick a topic for a review article. Getting them published, though, is another matter. And I would say that before you start to write a review article, so an article that's going to summarize the state of the game, the state of the art, to go back to that first question that we had a little bit earlier, you should line up a journal Go to a journal, write to the editors at some of the Bentham Science Review article publishing journals, for example, and say, dear editor, I'm thinking of writing a review paper on this, because you can take it from me, it's much, much harder to get review papers published if you don't have an editor already interested in the first place. This is because most review papers are actually invited by journal editors. So keep that in mind as well. I hope that answers your question. Aurea, again, my apologies for pronunciation, is asking, there are reviewers that take profit of the written weaknesses to criticize the work. Even that, you advise to write them. Yes, yes, absolutely. Because if a reviewer picks up on something that you've already stated in the paper, they can't criticize you for it. And if they do, then you have a strong argument to take to the editor and get that review overrided. Okay, so for example, if one of my studies I write, although I've addressed this question, there's a shortcoming in my data collection because I was only able to collect data from 5 individuals, you're telling the journal, you're telling the editor, you're telling the peer reviewers that you're aware of that problem, right? They can't criticize you then for having only talked about it and given the reasons for that in the article. That our presentations, we're certainly going to talk about managing and dealing with peer review. Cultures play in communicating globally. They are different, aren't they? Absolutely. Great question. Absolutely. Different academic cultures in different parts of the world have very different communication skills, and it feeds into the way that different cultures react to different situations. Let me give you an example. In the UK, where I'm from, in Germany, in the US, PhD students in particular, when they get comments back on their work that might be negative comments, their reaction often can be that that's the reviewer's problem. They often think, in my experience, how come the reviewer didn't understand my brilliant work? That's the reviewer's problem. That's a common reaction in some academic cultures. In other academic cultures, maybe in your culture, I certainly know this is the case in some Asian countries, people get negative comments on their work. They get defeated. They feel like, oh, how can I ever get my work up to the standard where it can get published in international journals? Let me tell you that the way that you react and the way that you communicate and the way that you deal with rejection as an academic is so important. And again, this is a topic that we'll come back to and talk about in later presentations, because managing rejection as an academic can seriously enhance your career path if you deal with rejection in the right way. So hope that answers your question. Are the contents of the abstract the same or different from the contents in the article? The abstract summarizes the contents of the main article in a concise, easy to understand way. So the answer is yes, but not in as much detail. You've got to tell the reader in the abstract enough information for them to understand everything that you did. So that's why there's a real trick to abstract writing. Which is better for conclusion writing? Enumerate the factors or just use the words several factors? I would say, depending on your subject area, it's always better to be precise in your academic writing. So I would say 8 factors have been shown to control this particular variable rather than several factors. Be precise if possible in your academic writing. I think that's always better. I have shown that 3 variables significantly affect water level change in this particular environment, rather than writing several things have caused the water. You know, it's important to be precise, if possible, in your writing. Nick, I was having some glitches during the presentation, probably due to my connection. Yes, we will send everybody that's registered for this presentation a link to watch the re-recording, and keep a close eye on the Bentham Science YouTube channel, because it will be it's going to be up. The nice presentation. Is it compulsory to submit supplementary material? Very often you will need to include supplementary material in order to explain everything that you did to the reviewers. It depends on your subject area. It's not compulsory, but it's often a good idea to provide supplementary information in order to make sure that everybody reading the paper has all the information that they need. What are the most common plagiarism checking softwares for journal papers? Dr. Sadiq is asking this. There are several. The most commonly used is called Authenticate, but that's a paid-for service. There's another one called Turnitin. You can find free online a number of services that will check your work. Even just running it through search engines can be a good starting point to check student work. Authenticate is a service that lots of journals tend to use. Roshini is asking, can you publish academic papers independently, or should you be associated with an institution? Very interesting, very good question. The answer to this is no. You do not need to be associated with an institution, but because of the way that peer review works, unfortunately, in many journals, people actually look to see what academic institution you're affiliated with. This is why blind peer review, so sending articles out to reviewers without telling the reviewers the author's identity or institution, is commonly thought by authors especially to be the fairest way of assessing academic articles. I'll give you two examples. I have friends working in Romania. I currently live and work in Hungary, in the next door country. My friends in Romania tried to get an article published in a number of different journals. When they added an author from the University of Manchester, the paper stopped getting rejected and got accepted immediately. So that shows you what you probably already know to be the case. Unfortunately, if you submit an article to an international journal, it's very, very likely to be reviewed by an English-speaking white man. So this is just the nature of peer review. Unfortunately, we get around this at journals and at publishing companies by using what's called blind peer review. Okay, so that I hope answers your question, guys. Thank you so much for all the great comments. Also, I hope you'll sign up for the next in our webinar series 1 month away from today. And please check out Bentham Science. Look at their website. Have a look at Bentham Science as an outlet for some of your research, if that's something that's interesting for you as a working academic. Open access journals are the future of academic publishing, we strongly believe. When we online free plagiarism service, okay, I'll come back and answer the remaining questions that we've gotten. A lot of questions today, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for everybody. Get in touch with me. Please reach out to me or to our colleagues at Bentham Science. Gareth Dyke is my name. Thank you so much for listening. And we hope to see you again in the future. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of the day.